everybody, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome. My name is Zoe, but most people know me on here on Instagram as ZAREPTILES, and of course, you guys all know Arcadius, my iguana. Today, we're going to be talking about my top 10 pet peeves when it comes to reptile keeping. Just kidding, there's actually 11, so we're going to have a bonus pet peeve, and that one's actually going to be my number 1 pet peeve. If you guys have been around for a while, you guys probably already know what that is. We're going to save that one for last. So I've been talking about making this video for a while. I know a lot of other pet keepers have made this video. I've been planning this video. Every time I come up with a new pet peeve, I add it to the list in my phone. So I have just been building this list, waiting for it to be ready for this video. So before we jump into it, a little disclaimer. A lot of these pet peeves are really just my personal opinion, things personal to me. Some of them actually go back to my zookeeping background. So again, very personal pet peeves. So this isn't being targeted at anyone. These are just personal things that drive me nuts. This isn't supposed to be anything hugely negative. It's just my personal pet peeves, and I'm going to silence my phone now. Okay, so my first pet peeve is the word cages. I hate with a burning passion when people refer to animal enclosures as cages. Nothing grinds my gears more than that. Okay, we are in the 21st century. We are far beyond cages. When I think of cages, I think of zoos way at the beginning with the metal steel bars, bare concrete floors, when animals were taken and shown off and given as gifts and shown off by the rich for money, for funsies. There wasn't that concept of conservation and education yet. Okay, that's what I think of when we think of cages. So I hate that word. I hate using that word to talk about our animal enclosures. So I'm talking about my animals, I say enclosures. If I'm talking about the enclosure at a zoo, I say habitat or exhibit. I know we're trying to get into the habit of saying habitat, so you'll probably hear a lot more people start saying that now over exhibit. I switch back and forth between both. I try to say habitat, but I've just always said exhibit. So yes, I know a lot of people that don't come from an animal background say the word cage. I've gotten comments on my videos saying like, oh, what did you make this cage out of? Or what are the dimensions of that cage? And every time I read a comment that says cage, it just hits me deep. So my pet peeve number 2 is when keepers don't strive to go above the bare minimum. Yes, the minimum enclosure size for a male Kenyan sand boa is a 10-gallon. Should they be kept in a 10-gallon? I absolutely do not think so. I think 20-gallon long minimum or more. I'm not sure what gallon my enclosures are for my sand boa, but my sand boa enclosure is 2 feet by 18 inches by 12 inches, so essentially 2 foot by 18 inches. And depending on how big she gets will depend if she gets more or not, or gets a bigger one or not. Right now she doesn't quite stretch out the length of her enclosure, so by my standards that's good for her. You know, minimum for crested geckos, 20-gallon tall. Well, 20-gallon long turn so that it's tall. Now that I've done other upgrades in my room, those seem way too small for me. So that's just like one example. So I definitely think we should be striving for above the bare minimum of what we can give our animals. Because I've seen a lot of people say like, well, what if you can only afford the bare minimum? You shouldn't be shaming people for not being able to afford more than a 10-gallon for their male Kenyan sand boa. I kind of think I can. That's just kind of my mindset. If you don't go into getting an animal with the mindset that you're going to go above and beyond for that animal, then I don't think you should be getting that animal. I don't think it's a good mindset to go into getting an animal with the thought that you're only going to do what the bare minimum requires. As caretakers for our animals, we have to do what is best for them because they cannot vocalize, they cannot tell us things, they cannot make decisions for themselves. That's on us. So we have to go above and beyond to make sure they're living an exceptional life. And if you go into getting an animal thinking that you're just going to do the bare minimum, that's pet peeve of mine. Okay, pet peeve number 3, and I'm pretty sure we all have this pet peeve, heat rocks. Why are heat rocks still a thing? Why are they even still sold in stores? I don't know. Somebody please comment below and tell me why heat rocks are even still in production. Okay, pet peeve number 4. This one I sometimes, I don't want to say get hate on, but get a lot of disagreement on. I posted about this one in a TikTok that I did and posted on Instagram Reels, and I did have a couple of people come and disagree with me, but you know, they were very respectful of my opinions on why this was a pet peeve of mine, and they shared their thoughts, and I respect that, you know. If we can have a good conversation, all good. But my 4th pet peeve is snake racks. Now there's a couple parts to this before you come for me. Listen to my thoughts, because there are 3 parts to this pet peeve, and you'll kind of understand a little bit more why this is a pet peeve and what it is about snake racks that are a pet peeve. So I understand why snake racks are used by breeders. I get it. You're breeding, you've got a ton of babies, you need somewhere to put them all. I get it. And you know what? In that case, I'm okay with it. Oh, hello. Are you trying to turn around? Nope. Okay, so the first part of this pet peeve is when non-breeders use racks. Okay, racks were made for a purpose, for breeders, so I don't like when non-breeders, just your regular hobbyists, lean on racks as a way to save space so that they can have more animals. I've also gotten the argument from people saying that their snakes did better when put into racks. Maybe that really is true and that their snake really did just like the confined space, but I have to wonder what enclosure they were coming from before that made them do better in racks. If they had a really big enclosure, was it full of enough enrichment and hiding places for them to feel comfortable, or was it kind of bare and empty with like just 2 hides and a water dish? In which case, maybe they weren't super comfortable and didn't feel totally safe. So aside from those that think their snakes are doing better in racks, my problem is, like I said, when people use racks just as a way to save space so they can have more room for animals. And someone has said that to me before. They said, you know, it saved space, this is why I did it, because I wanted to make more room. Okay, this kind of goes back to my second pet peeve about not wanting to go above and beyond for your animal. And I'm actually surprised I didn't put this on my list, so I guess we'll just throw it in with here. But this is a pet peeve that I have in the animal field, actually. But it also does apply to reptile keeping. And that's when people do what is most convenient for them and not what's most beneficial for their animal. It's not supposed to be about what's convenient for you. It's supposed to be what's beneficial for your animal. So having snake racks might be more beneficial to you because you get to have more room for animals, but is it the most beneficial thing to your animals to not have the room that they could have with a large enclosure where they can stretch out and really exhibit all of their natural behaviors? So I could go on and on about that for a while, but you kind of get my gist. Part 2 of this pet peeve is when breeders still use their racks for their breeding animals and their adults. So for babies, I understand, you know, they're tiny, they're also not going to be there very long. So they're only in a rack for so long before they are sold and moved to another home. So for that, I understand, you know, that's fine, whatever. But the ones that are breeders that they have for the whole length of their life, living in those racks, that doesn't sit right with me. Those snakes should have the opportunity to have large enclosures, room to stretch out and explore. And then the third part of my pet peeve with snake racks is when they are the bare minimum. So I'm glad to see a lot of people are now moving towards more enriching ways of doing snake racks, providing hides, things to climb on, accessories. So there definitely are ways to make snake racks more enriching. And you know, that's good. At least if you have a rack and you're striving to make it more enriching, that's going above the bare minimum of the rack bare minimum. And I believe Snake Discovery tries to do a little more enrichment with their bins. I don't watch too many of the videos involving breeding and whatnot because that's just not what I'm interested in. But I have heard that they are going a little more towards the enriching side of their snake racks. So I know that was very long-winded, but so now you've got the 3 parts of that pet peeve. Now where does it all stem from? So a lot of you know I started off in the zoo field. So that alone should explain my dislike for snake racks. I personally like to go for bigger, the better, more naturalistic, enrichment filled. So even if it's not natural, because the animals that are bred in captivity, they don't know what is natural for them. They don't know what the ones out in the wild are seeing. So even if it's not natural looking, because naturalistic enclosures, those are for our appeal, not so much for the animals, because again, they don't know what natural is. What's important is that there's enrichment, lots of places to hide, lots of things to do, lots of things to climb on, and the ability to showcase natural behaviors. So obviously that alone has a lot of issues for me with snake racks. I know there's different size snake racks. I still don't think is going to be enough for what I think an animal should have. So I could go on and on about my dislike for snake racks and why I don't like them, but you guys should get the gist by now. If you're a breeder or snake rack user, don't come for me in the comments. Remember, this is my personal opinion. It stems from my background in the zoo field. Self-explanatory. Moving on. Pet peeve number 5 is when people complain about the costs of vets. People are always like, oh, the vet's so expensive, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Yes, vets are expensive, especially when you go to a vet that not only sees dogs and cats, but they see exotics as well. Now let me tell you why. First of all, obviously, going to vet school is not cheap. I only have a bachelor's in animal behavior, ecology, and conservation. Only a bachelor's, 4 years. And I am so in debt. I couldn't imagine going for biology and pre-vet and then going on to vet school. For my major, I needed 2 intro biology courses. I passed those suckers with a C+ in both of them. Now, I'm pretty smart. I was always very good at school. But college biology, I think part of the problem was I just really was not interested in the topics they were teaching. But I was not good at bio in college, and I only had the 2 intro courses. So kudos to those that were pre-vet. I know they went through hell and back. So kudos to them. And then to go on to vet school, those are some serious debts. Now most of these vets have their own practices. So they have to be able to manage and afford their own practice and pay off their student loans. On top of that, all these different animals have different systems. They have different body systems. They have different reactions to medications. They have different diseases, different problems. Vets have to be very knowledgeable in what it is they are treating. So if it's dogs and cats, they're very familiar with the systems and medications and whatnot for dogs and cats. Once you get into vets that see dogs, cats, and exotics, they have to know dogs, cats, and all the different exotics. They have to know the difference in systems and medications for birds versus cats versus dogs versus horses and hoofstock versus reptiles versus amphibians. So you're paying for that knowledge. They have to stay up to date with the changing information for all of those different groups of animals. So yeah, vets are gonna be expensive. I've been to some vets that I'm surprised weren't more expensive. Okay, you go for pre-vet, you go for vet school, and then you complain about the cost of going to see a vet. Because the reality is, at the end of the day, vets still aren't making very much. Once they pay for everything that needs to be paid for their private practice or the building they're in, pay for employees, pay their own personal bills each month for their home. Maybe they've got a house mortgage, they've got then their student debt, maybe they have families to feed. At the end of the day, vets really are not making very much. So if you think your vet's expensive, they're trying to live. Okay, moving on. Pet peeve number 6. And I've heard a lot of people have this pet peeve as well. Calling yourself a rescue when you're not a rescue. In my opinion, you can say that you like to rescue animals. You can say that some of your pets were rescues. That's fine. I've done that. I consider 𝘼𝙗𝙗𝙗 a rescue. You guys have noticed throughout this video, he's got a bump here, he's got a kink here, he's got a kink here. He's a mess. He was a rescue. He's doing great now. But on the outside, he's a mess. And that's fine. My issue is when you call yourself a rescue to get animals and then they become your personal pets. You're not a registered rescue. You don't have the licenses to call yourself an actual legitimate rescue. And then if you ask for donations on top of that, that really grinds my gears, because if you keep these animals and they become your pets, you're not asking for donations to help the animals you've rescued to then turn around and find them good, loving homes. You're basically asking for donations to help take care of your pets. Now, some of you may disagree. I might grind some gears. That's fine. Personal opinions. Oh, number seven. This one's not meant to be just a personal opinion that you sweep under the rug if you disagree. This one, I want everyone to hear. 3 parts to this one, kind of like the snake rack one. 3 parts. The main concept is people that have the my way or the highway mentality. I've talked about this so much. This is like my second biggest pet peeve. Like I said, we're going to talk about my main pet peeve at the end. This is like my second biggest pet peeve. This makes me so mad. This is where I have to like hold my tongue and try not to get involved in drama online, because I hate drama. I think it's stupid. I don't like people publicly airing whatever they've got going on. This is where I really have to hold my tongue when I see this happening on like Instagram or YouTube, because it's just so difficult for me, because this drives me nuts. So when people have the my way or highway mentality, when they think their way of doing things is the only right way, is the only proper way, and if you don't do that, you're dumb, you're stupid, you're doing it all wrong, you shouldn't have your animal, that whole baloney situation. If there's one thing I've learned from my time not only keeping reptiles but in the zoo field and bouncing around to different zoos and aquariums, is that there are a million trillion ways of doing things that are all correct. Are some better than others? Sure. It's kind of like my mindset of you should go above and beyond for your animals all the time, but there's always going to be people that just meet the bare minimum requirements and see that that's good enough. Is it technically wrong? No. Is it ideal? In my opinion, no. But is it wrong? No. Going off of that is when you don't allow people to learn from their mistakes. If someone's making a mistake with their reptile keeping and you attack them for it, instead of politely educating, offering alternatives, and allowing them to learn and fix their mistake, you're part of the problem in the reptile community. There is no room for bullies here. No room. Not tolerated. Go away. If you try to help someone and they don't want to listen and they're being rude, you just have to cut your losses. There's no sense in fighting with someone over the internet if they're not going to listen. Now, you have to keep in mind your tone of voice. If you're trying to help someone, but you're coming across as snarky, rude, and a know-it-all, I wouldn't want to listen to you either. Even if I know I'm in the wrong, I'm going to pretend I'm not, because I don't want to admit that you're right if you're being a total jerk. I'll probably still go and change and fix my care anyway with the information you gave me, but I'm not going to let you know that I'm using that information because you were a jerk and I don't want to give you the satisfaction. So no matter who you talk to online and what you're talking about, you need to check your tone of voice. And you need to make sure you are being respectful. Because respect goes both ways. You can't expect someone to respectfully accept your information and your critiques if you aren't giving them respectfully. So there's that two-way thing right there that goes with that pet peeve. And then the third part of that is those that refuse to change with the time. So they're still thinking their way is the way to go. But as we continue on in the years and more studies are grown, or more studies are done, we're growing, we're learning, new products are coming out. So the reptile hobby is constantly changing. We're learning new things all the time. When I started out, I don't know that Arcadia was even a thing. Now, I love Arcadia. I tell everyone you have to use Arcadia products. I use tons of Arcadia products. So that's something I learned, just keeping up with information and learning as I go along. So I think those that are very stuck in their ways from however many years ago, that refuse to continue to learn or continue to grow or accept new ways of doing things, hold the hobby back. Again, personal opinion, but I said what I said. Number 8. This is more of a community thing, not so much a reptile keeping thing. It has to do with Instagram, and that's when people ask me to share their stuff or promote them. When I'm online, I'm looking for genuine interactions, genuine friendships, genuine conversations. If you just message me and ask me to promote your account because you want to grow, or share your stuff because you want it to be seen, I'm not going to do it. In fact, I'm probably going to ignore your message. I want people to message me because they want to interact with me, because they want to get to know me, because they want to have a conversation with me. If we have a good conversation and we're connecting and it's like a real, like, heartfelt interaction, then yeah, you know, I'll probably end up sharing your stuff. I'll probably end up following you back. I'll probably end up, like, you know, sharing your profile and tagging you and things. But if you come to me when I've never seen you before, just ask me to share your stuff, that drives me nuts. I'm a real person. I don't think my following is that big compared to others. I'm still amazed at the following that I do have. I'm very grateful for it. There's those that definitely have a lot bigger following than me. So for me, it still seems tiny, but thinking back, I can't even believe that I'm at what I'm at now. I think I have 16K on Instagram. I can't believe that, but it took me so long to get to this point. I never asked anyone to share my account. I worked my butt off to grow it to where it is now. So I can't fathom messaging someone I've never interacted with and being like, hey, can you share my account so I can, like, get some of your followers? That drives me nuts. Genuine interactions are how you grow. That's what I'm standing by. Because when I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Twitter, I want to interact with people and have it be genuine. I know I'm talking to a real person. I want them to treat me like a real person, not just someone that has all these subscribers and all these followers. For me, it's not about the numbers. It's about the genuine connections and interactions. Here's your lesson to you. You message me, ask me to share your profile and share your stuff and promote you, and I've never talked to you or seen you before in my life, I'm going to delete your message. Alright, we're getting down there. Number 9. Again, this one is a very personal one for me. A lot of people will not have this issue. I do. Coming from the zoo field, right? My goal was to always become a zookeeper. I ended up becoming a zoo educator before leaving the zoo field because I wanted to move back home, and I accepted a full-time position at the nature center. One of my biggest regrets, I know I made the right move, but one of my biggest regrets is that I never ended up having a keeper position. So I was never able to call myself a zookeeper, and now I'm not able to say that I ever was a zookeeper. I went from zookeeping intern to zoo educator to naturalist and head of animal care. Yes, I'm head of animal care, but it's at the nature center. I'm not a zookeeper. So I will not claim to be a zookeeper. As a zoo educator, not going to claim to be a zookeeper. I was a zoo educator. So connecting that to reptile keeping, what really drives me nuts, I don't see this too often, but I have seen it, is when people call themselves zookeepers when they don't work at a zoo. If you don't work at a zoo as a zookeeper and you call yourself a zookeeper, that's going to drive me nuts. So, example of the scenarios that I've seen. People with their own reptiles at home, their own animals, and they call themselves the zookeeper. No. You're the pet owner. You're the one that takes care of your pets. You're not the zookeeper. So if you have an education program and you just show up with your own pets, please don't call yourself the zookeeper. Because all these kids now are thinking, oh my gosh, that's a zookeeper. Like, if I was, back when I was little, if someone showed up with all these reptiles and said they were a zookeeper, I would be like, oh my god, you work at a zoo, you've got my dream job. No, they're a hobbyist. They just have pet reptiles that they are now sharing with you. So when I have my reptile education business, I will not be calling myself the zookeeper. It's not a zoo. These are my personal animals. They will be ambassador animals. I will be an educator, but I will not be calling myself a zookeeper because it's not a zoo. It'll be straight out of my reptile room. So again, that's a very personal pet peeve, but just something to add to the list because it just drives me nuts. If you're not a zookeeper at a zoo, please don't call yourself a zookeeper. Part of that just me being petty, because that was always my dream, was to be able to call myself a zookeeper, and then I quit before I got to that dream. So that's just a very petty pet peeve of mine, but just, it is what it is. Alright, here we are, number 10, and then we've got the big pet peeve. So, number 10. And this one I see all too often. It drives me nuts. And it kind of goes a little bit with the my way or highway thing, and not giving people a chance to learn and grow, is when you call someone an animal abuser because they made a mistake. Maybe they're not as up to date on the newer information and products and care. That doesn't make them an animal abuser. Maybe it makes them uninformed and not as educated as they otherwise could be at this day and age. But they're not an animal abuser. They're not doing it intentionally. So when you call someone an animal abuser because they made a mistake, that makes you look like a crappy person, in my opinion. The amount of people I have seen calling people online animal abusers because they made a mistake, because they're not as up to date with information nowadays, that drives me nuts. Educate. Send them articles, send them links, help them out. Let them know you're there if they want assistance and help. Do not just jump to calling them an animal abuser. Seriously. Why can't we all just get along and help one another? Okay, the final pet peeve, the one that gets the golden crown and the throne, the one that I literally monitor Instagram for. I am checking. When people say they get new pets, this is what I am checking for. I'm a little bit insane when it comes to this pet peeve, and that is quarantine. You guys have heard me talk about quarantine all the time on Instagram, on here. I am like the most nut job person when it comes to quarantine. You best believe when someone gets a new pet, I'm snooping to see if they have quarantined their animal or not. I am like the quarantine Sherlock Holmes. I am making sure I know who's quarantining and who's not. Now, try not to be a hypocrite. Not everyone knows about quarantine, how to properly quarantine, the effects of what can happen if you don't quarantine. So I try to be mindful with my pet peeve. But if you're someone who I've seen post about quarantine, clearly showing you know how important quarantine is, how to quarantine, and then you don't quarantine, you make it very clear and very obvious that you aren't quarantining your animals, ooh, you know I'm judging. You are on my list and I am judging. But this is why I make quarantine content all the time, because even I was really crappy at quarantining starting out. I didn't quite understand the severity of it. I knew it was a thing, but I didn't like take it super seriously until I was really in the zoo field and saw how important quarantine was and how serious they took it. So now I implement basically zoo level quarantines with my animals. And I think what really set it in for me, because at this point I was still kind of, at this point I had quarantined a few times, but when I got Kronk, my 𝘬𝙪𝙨 boa, there was a guy in the parking lot when we were doing the handoff that saw him, because we did it outside of an expo, and said, oh my gosh, is that a 𝘬𝙪𝙨 boa? Like, I used to have one, I loved him, and he told me he lost his whole collection, like 40 something snakes or 50 something snakes. You could tell he loved these snakes, especially a 𝘬𝙪𝙨 boa. He lost them all because he brought in one animal that was sick and it wiped out all of them. At that moment, I was like, I've got enough animals now. I need to be enforcing quarantine, not just for certain animals, for every animal. I don't care how healthy an animal seems when I get it. I don't care if it's coming from a breeder that I trust. Every animal goes through an intense quarantine period with me before coming into the room. I've shared my stories, I've shared my methods, I've shared my routine for quarantine. I've done so much quarantine content, I talked about so much on Instagram. That's my way of trying to help educate people on the topic of quarantine, to make sure that that message is getting out there, that it's still being talked about and taught. So I understand if people aren't quarantining, that maybe don't have that knowledge or that understanding. It's the people that have posted about quarantine that I know that they know how important quarantine is, and then I catch them not quarantining. That's my pet peeve. So again, I'm just the biggest nut job when it comes to quarantine. So there it is, the holy grail of my pet peeves. I should make merch that says something about quarantining on it. Unfortunately, if I did that right now, I think people would think it has to do with the pandemic and not actually with quarantining your animals. But maybe I'll come up with something, maybe. We'll see. Alright, so those are all of my 10 plus 1 pet peeves. Let me know what your pet peeves are in the description below, or if you agree with some of my pet peeves. Where are you going? What are you doing? Arcadius had to go away. He was getting restless. But let me know in the comments what your reptile keeping pet peeves are. I think it's just so interesting to hear from other people, because some of them are like super personal to you. Like, there were several of mine that were super personal and stemmed from my zoo background. So let me know in the comments below what your reptile keeping pet peeves are. And yeah, so like always, thank you guys for joining me for another video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more videos, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye!